everybody. How's everyone doing tonight? Woo! Good evening, everyone. My name is Danielle Sutton. I will be your moderator for the first panel discussion tonight. I'm very, very excited. I'm an All Tech is Human affiliate, a trustworthy AI strategist, and also currently a postgraduate student at the University of Cambridge studying technology policy. So very excited to be with all of you tonight. We have some amazing, amazing people here tonight. And so I'd like to go up first and welcoming our amazing panelists. So first and foremost, we have David Hunter, VP of Platform and Trust and Safety at Crisp, a Kroll business, if you want to come up. We also have Dr. Elizabeth Milovidov. She is an amazing lawyer, powerhouse by background, and also a digital parenting coach. Warm welcome. And then we have Dr. Andrew Shabilsky, a professor of human behavior and technology at the University of Oxford. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, for the warm welcomes. We don't have a whole lot of time here, so I want to make sure that we make the most of it. And so without further ado, we'll go into our first question of the evening. So we see discussions all over the world, all over the media about online harms and the danger of being online, and specifically as it relates to children, okay? And so oftentimes we hear the hot topics of cyberbullying to gaming addiction, and we see these hot topics come and go without really understanding the crux of the issue. And so my first question to our panelists tonight are around what are, in your fields, the major issues revolved around online harms and safety issues, and is it really different from what we see in the physical world?
I think I'm gonna go first before Andy depresses you all. Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I do is really looking at digital parenting and digital families and how they can thrive. And I think that it's really true that we are seeing that there are just so many issues where people are reading media and they're thinking, oh my goodness, this is happening, what's going on? But when I'm speaking with parents and families, I always say, take the tech out just for a second, right? To sit there and look at the situation and not blame technology for it, not blame the devices, the social media platforms, but just, for example, cyberbullying, right? We know that's always been a huge, huge issue. I'm American, but I've been in France for 28 years. And in Europe, we have seen systematically that cyberbullying is one of the #1 reasons why kids are calling into the helplines that are run by the European Commission. Cyberbullying, let's take the cyber out. Parents feel like they don't know what to do when it's cyberbullying, but if you ask them what can you do when it's bullying, if your child is being bullied in the schoolyard, they have some ideas. So I think that part of this online, offline, and I know that it's seamless, I get it, is that people are afraid. They're just, parents are just afraid of the unknown. If your child is looking at something, let's say inappropriate content online, parents will freak out rather than sit there and say, what would happen when I was a kid and my parents found that magazine under a bed, right? Parents do have the skills. You're laughing. I know it wasn't you. But parents do have these skills, and I think for me that is the biggest issue, irrespective of the harms, because let's face it, the digital is bringing all sorts of new things. Tomorrow will be another day, another challenge. And so parents and families, we don't have to learn how to do one social media app. We need to understand critical thinking for all of the future. And I think that was a bit too long, but I'm gonna,
Awesome, thank you.
I would say that something really interesting happens when we think about kind of the science behind a question like an online harm and kind of looking at how our focus often changes pretty rapidly between being worried about different types of technology. You know, we were worried just a few years ago about, say, violent video games. You know, cyberbullying has always been in the background in some way, but then new things will pop in, like social media or generative AI. And I just think something really funny happens when we talk about the science behind it. Most of the time when you would make a very grandiose claim, a scientific one, like something is destroying a generation of young people or ruining their mental health. If you were to make that claim in another scientific field, like in physics, in astrophysics, you would be asked, like, what is the evidence that you've found a new planet, or you think that gravity works differently? But we don't hold evidence about online harms or the mental well-being of young people online, or say the impact between face-to-face bullying and cyberbullying to the same standards. And absolutely, Elizabeth is 100% right that, you know, face-to-face bullying is something that's easier for parents to tackle. But cyberbullying sounds really scary. It's very disempowering. But at the end of the day, the number of people who are young people who are only cyberbullied is vanishingly small. You know, we looked at data for more than 150,000 young people in England, and we found only 48 of them had only been cyberbullied. The great majority of young people who are cyberbullied, 99+% of them, are also bullied face-to-face. And that synergy is actually the thing that really could potentially hurt young people. And if we kind of treat the cyber world and evidence about the cyber world as sacrosanct, even if it's low quality, it can lead to really bad decision-making, both on the part of policymakers and regulators, but also it's very distracting as a parent. It risks us taking the eye off the ball.
Yeah, I think, you've covered a lot of it. I think, you know, CRISP, as a company, we've been around since 2005. When we were created, we were 10 years before, as people say, you know, trust and safety became a thing, and really, it only became relatively well known in the last few years. Our founder had an online platform in the late 90s, and he realized there was problems with harmful content and harmful behavior, even back then, and people would say, wow, you spotted a thing, you know, so early, and then it took 15 years for kind of people to catch up. But there really has been that change in terms of the online, offline. You know, I say to a lot of people when we talk about online harms and the risk on the internet, it's really just the delivery mechanism that it came in. It's not, the two things aren't detached. But I would say also that even still, you know, a lot of people in this room, we work in this space all day, every day. But actually, it's still not something that people are comfortable talking about, you know, regularly talking about. Probably a lot of you in the same situation. You know, we go for dinner with our friends, and often my wife will say to me, just stop talking about this stuff. It's not what people want to hear. And we know also when you go to other regions and other places, it's just not talked about at all. It's not something that people want to even admit that it exists in their communities, or is happening to their children, or that the people that they know are committing offences on the internet. So this really isn't yet a mainstream talking point. You know, this is a relatively large room. There's still standing room available for people. So I think we are still a relatively small group. There might be thousands of us or tens of thousands of us, but I still think for the majority of people out there, this still feels like a novel problem, a novel thing, when actually it isn't. It's the reality as we kind of see most days.
I love what each of you have said about like the interesting like synergies between like the digital world and the physical world and the real world, you know, challenges as a parent. So even what you were talking about, David, just then about the challenges with making sure that we're actually able to apply it in like from a trust and safety lens in a novel way that's actually, you know, effective. And so I'd like to continue on that strain of thought. And this is a question to you, David, around what CRISP, a Kroll business, is doing in their preventative approaches and proactive strategies to try and mitigate and address the harms that we're seeing in the online world.
Yeah, so CRISP was founded, as I say, because our founder had an online platform. He wanted to solve the problem. When he had the platform, he had two options. Well, a few options, but his main options were he could throw human moderators at a problem, and he worked out the cost of that, and it just wouldn't have worked. Or he could try and build some technology to deal with a problem, which is what he did. He then saw the value in the technology, so he set out to build CRISP as a business. And that's job, the technology's job was to spot harmful behaviors in online environments. So in the mid-2000s, we're talking about chat environments and gaming environments, looking at grooming and exploitation and bullying and other issues that existed in those chat environments. But it's a very reactive approach. There is some offense happening that can be detected and users can be dealt with. Now, the way our technology has evolved over the years is able to pick those things up earlier and earlier, but there is still somebody active and there is still an offence that they are trying to commit, and there is still obviously a potential victim. And in the other work we do, this is around looking at intelligence for platforms. Platforms either who are being hammered by a particular problem, they are at risk of child exploitation, of extremism, of other risks, and kind of catch us all afterwards and we can kind of share more detail, but also trying to provide intelligence for platforms who are not yet at risk are not facing the issue. So this could be platforms who potentially have features available to them within their product that could be exploited by people that want to groom children, people that want to trade child abuse material, people that want to share their radicalization material to get people to join an extremist group. And by providing them that intelligence, they can then build their product in a safer way. We know people will talk about safer by design. I think the reality is that is probably some way off for a fair number of platforms. But letting them know proactively that this is how you will be hurt next. That world has evolved in the world of cyber with red teaming and other exercises. I think within trust and safety, it's still at its early stages, but letting people know, here's how bad folks on the internet will do things to your platform that will put you at risk. It may cost you your job as a head of trust and safety. It may cost you advertisers if you're trying to sell adverts to them, and ultimately may may cause real harm to people, whether it be interfering with an electoral process, harming children in terms of grooming and exploitation. So that proactive intelligence, we work very hard on helping people from a proactive perspective.
Oh, wow. That sounds really, really fascinating, particularly when you're talking about the threat landscape and the actors that are involved in it. And so I'd like to then go next to Elizabeth and talk more about that from the consumer lens. So from that perspective and knowing the threat landscape that exists, as a parent, and also what are specific strategies that you've come across in your own work to be effective in helping parents help their children to navigate these spaces, understanding the threats that are out there.
What a question. I think that similar to what David was saying is about this awareness, right? And understanding what's out there. And it's the same thing for parents and caregivers and anyone who is dealing with a child or a young person online. I know that people always want a magic pill, a simple bullet, an app that will take care of all of these things for you, that will provide parental guidance, parental control. But as I always say, there doesn't exist. You are the parental control, and you are the one who is responsible for raising a digital child, explaining digital identity, understanding their privacy, protection. But without me getting on my soapbox, if I had to say something simple, really it just goes down to two core things, which is critical thinking. Really start thinking about what we are doing, what we are giving to our children as we hand over the iPads, as we hand over the smartphone because the child is not eating quickly and we want to have a quiet dinner, and no parent shaming, okay? I have done some of these things myself. I'm just saying that we have to think about it as we do it, think about it before we do it, so that way now I'm stuck. Yeah, I know, and I did it.
I was watching, yeah.
Moms multitask. So just this whole idea that we have to really think about the technology, the social media platform, the gaming. The number of parents who come to me and I see their 7-year-old is playing Call of Duty. And I'm like, do you even understand what ratings are? They don't know that things like this exist. And so there are so many things, even with 9-year-olds who go on social media platforms that are 13 plus. And then we wonder, well, how did that happen? I think that parents have to realize if they treat this sort of unknown the same way they would an alley, you wouldn't let your child just go skipping down that alley. So why are we letting them skip down the digital highway? But so my first point was critical thinking. My second one is communication, because even if you hand over all that stuff and your child is there and you're a young person, because my own boys are 13 and 16, communication is the way to talk them off the ledge. It's the way to understand what's happening. It's the way to intervene and to bring in your maturity, your experience. You may not understand the technology or the dynamics, but we all understand Mean Girls. We all know what's happening when these little things are happening online, et cetera. And so that's where parents can really bring in that voice. And to all of the parents who are sitting there saying, yeah, Elizabeth, but I've got teens and they don't listen to me, I will say what I always say is that rather than sit there and talk to them for 100 minutes saying the same thing, speak 1 minute for 100 days. That's over 3 months of you getting those messages out there, because while teenagers may not be listening, they will eventually hear it. Critical thinking, communication.
Thank you. I'm not a parent myself, but now I know. Give me a few years, I'll be able to apply it. Thank you so much. And now, Andy, I'd love to talk a little bit more about, from your perspective, you've been working in academia and you do a lot of amazing, amazing research, some of which you've already cited before. I'm curious, when we talk about children, there's so many different types of children, right? There's children, different ages, different backgrounds all over the world. And there's different risk profiles associated with that as well. I'd love to learn more about how we can make sure that we are able to create opportunities to create more of an online safe environment for people who are the most vulnerable. And not only that, but thinking about it from a global perspective, because oftentimes, we're only talking about, a lot of studies are only done in the, Western, countries and whatnot. And so would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a steer from Elizabeth here, which is, I'm going to use an old teaching trick, which is an advanced organizer. And I'm going to say, I'm going to answer the question in 2 ways. And in the first way, I absolutely to your point, it's very important to understand that we have a very, very North American and Western European perspective on what an online child's life is and what are the harms or the challenges that might face them. And 2 statistics I really want everyone in the room to take away from this evening with is that 96% of the studies about mental health and well-being of young people online are conducted in 5 English-speaking countries and in Western Europe. And this is not where young people live on this planet, all right? More than 90% of young people under 18 do not live in Europe. They do not live in North America. And every day, more and more of them are online. And both the risks and the opportunities that they face are fundamentally different and are not studied. This is again, 96% is focused on a vanishingly small percentage of young people online. Taking away the idea that you could take away a teenage girl's smartphone and that would be good for her mental health is a tremendously American, somewhat right-wing paternalistic idea. And the consequences of taking away TikTok in Utah is very, very different for a 16-year-old girl than doing the same thing in the Punjab or in Tamil Nadu. And that can't be overstated. The second thing I think is very important for us to understand is that we actually, if we're saying words like harm, and we're saying words like mental health, we need to be a hell of a lot more serious about what we're talking about, all right? Our children's lives are built, our children's lives happen in these online platforms. When you put your child on a plane, there is an aerospace engineer who has a license and is signed off on the design of that plane. When you drive your child across a bridge, there's a civil engineer who can say no to his or her boss if there's not enough cement in the construction of it. My family are all teachers and architects. They all have licenses because children live in their environments. I cannot overstate to you what a stupid idea it is to have a design code for principles of an online environment for children. If we take the idea that their mental health and their physical health is at stake, this shouldn't be voluntary. We have hundreds of thousands, millions of software engineers who build environments for our children, and they can't say no to their boss. They can't say, I will lose my license if I build an unsafe environment for my child, for the millions of children who use this platform. Maybe they sign up for some principles of online safety. But would you sign up for principles of safe chicken In the grocery store, would you sign off on principles for safe medication in your pharmacy, or for whether or not the ailerons on your plane have been connected properly? No. And so if we're going to take this seriously, it might mean that there's a more systematic thing, which obviously 100% on top of parenting and individual responsibility, obviously 100% on top of those technologies that empower parents and platforms to do the right thing. But we might want to think a bit more critically about if we're really serious about this idea that these platforms might be actively harmful. Because if that's true, and that's a big if, we might be thinking of a more systematic solution.
Wow, very, very powerful. I'm still processing just the stat from the beginning.
Yeah, that's the happy stat.
I told you he was going to do that.
That's pretty, wow, okay. And then let's have a broader conversation now with the entire panelists and think about, we've had issues with technology in the past, right? And we'll continue to have issues with technology going into the foreseeable future. And when thinking about this future, I think it's also really critical to think about what this future looks like, right? And so my question to the panelists now is around, what does this safer online environment look like? And what kind of measures of success or benchmarks can we set for ourselves to allow for that creation of that vision to become true?
Sure, I'm going to jump in really quickly because I 100% agree with what Andy was saying, but I also feel like while we're waiting for this to happen, this is when parents and platforms have to, find some strategies that work for them. And I'm going to take off my digital parenting hat for a second and put on the Lego Group hat, where I'm Senior Corporate Counsel for Games and Metaverse Experiences. And we did a project with UNICEF called Right Tech, which is Responsible Innovation Technology for Children. And we gathered, academics, we did research, really evidence-based to find out what is digital well-being, what does this look like? And then they came up with 8 criteria as to, how kids can actually thrive online. And while we, bandy about terms like safety by design, privacy by design, now well-being by design, I do think that these types of initiatives, they are a starting point where we get the conversation going, where we try to input these things as we create a digital experience. We think about digital well-being. I don't have to worry about going to my boss and saying, I didn't do this or I did that, because that is my job, to make sure that we have these things implemented into our digital products and services. So I think that we are getting there slowly, but in the interim, while we're waiting, it's still up to parents and platforms and all of us as stakeholders to get together to do the right thing, so that way children will do the right thing when there's no one looking over their shoulder.
Yeah, so I think when the conversation comes to the future, I think that there is often a problem in that when people, often the question about the future is often a really interesting, shiny thing to go at, and you can be very academic about it, and you can look to the future. And often it's the thing that people will then focus on as opposed to the right now. As Andy said, there are things that exist in the technology of today that are absolutely not safe. There are features that have been implemented into apps and games and other things that maybe the developers are naive, or maybe they're just able to not have to really care, where we know people are being put at harm and put at risk. I've had conversations through the work that we do with parents whose children have been exploited and extorted through features in applications that you wouldn't ever really think were a problem. Quite basic gaming apps that have just thrown a chat feature in there that has no safeguards in it whatsoever. It doesn't even have basic.
You can be bullied on a Google document.
Absolutely.
So, it's just that simple, yeah.
And we know people will use these. We know that people will find ways to do these things. There's, well-documented stories of people using playlists within music sharing applications that have been used to extort people. And actually, I think that when we think about the future, we get away from today. And there are absolutely problems today. There are, the equivalent of cars going around with no seatbelts and no airbags that people are just, freely uploading and people are using. So we can get ourselves lost there. People will absolutely get themselves all excited about 3D interconnected suits and virtual worlds and the things that could go wrong. Like, yeah, fine. But what about the Scrabble app that has a chat environment in it that nobody is monitoring, nobody's even collecting the information that goes in there, that goes on? And I think a lot of it, as you say, Elizabeth, comes down to parents also not knowing. Like, go and play with a lawnmower and see what happens and give me a shout if there's any problems. Oh, your arms have come off. And it's absolutely...
Now he's depressing.
I say come off as if...
Oh, that's a very British construction.
But it is. These are, when I was a kid, the thing that was said to me around, don't play with the washing machine because, well, actually, again, the kid got his arms ripped off. But the reason, even my eldest son is 8, and even he is getting more advanced with some of the technology than I am, and I work in this space. Right. So, we need to be thinking about the now as well as the future. And the last thing I would say, more as a parent than as a kind of person that works in trust and safety, as a parent that goes to a school, gets some information where, the kids have had an online safety thing today. Oh, guess what? 3 of the applications and platforms that are on there don't even exist anymore, and you haven't mentioned TikTok or Snapchat. So there's a whole disconnection between what people are being told, what people know about, and really the harms that exist.
Critical thinking.
And communication, right?
Communication, yeah.
Yeah, no, I would just add that I guess something really interesting happens where we want science to tell us maybe what's harmful or what's risky, and sometimes we kind of, in a non-systematic way, we kind of pick the things that seem scariest to us. And it's more of a values decision. And I want to emphasize, I have a conflict of interest. I'm a reviewer on the RITEC project, and Elizabeth's collaborators promised me the most updated version by tomorrow to read, which I'm looking forward to non-ironically. I like 7 of the 8 pillars quite a bit.
So depressing.
Only one of the pillars is kind of not great. But no, but in all seriousness, because we can talk about family now, my father grew up during the Vietnam War period in the United States. He did not need a low-quality social science study to tell him that playing violent video games was not what he wanted for his son. And so I had a relatively uncommon experience as someone who grew up in the northeast of the US of no wrestling and no gun toys and no violent video games. He was able to tell that this was the values that he wanted to guide his parenting, and he was able to educate himself in that way. And so I think that meetings like this are very important because they allow us to articulate and sometimes disagree about what type of internet or what type of platforms do we want for our children. But I would beg you all to when it comes to the solution space, to bring science back in. If we've decided we don't want a certain type of experience to be run into by young people, please have a clear plan, have key performance indicators, be able to hold someone accountable when they propose a way of making the internet safer, and make sure that that can be independently tested and verified, like we do with many other technologies in our societies. Because if we don't have that, it's fine that we start with a values place as an interim, because science can move quite slowly. But it's very important that if we're going to start tinkering with these things, we have a plan for measuring whether or not they work, and and for measuring unintended consequences. Because there are real human rights implications for influencing a child's right to play or their right to information about themselves or their sexuality or their identity. And many of the things that are proposed, they sound like bad ideas to me, but I'm even more scared of the fact that I wouldn't have any idea of how to test whether or not they worked.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in on the
Yeah.
when we're looking at key performance indicators as well? One of the problems we've got is that platforms they don't really exist in isolation.
No.
So the internet or the online world is a fluid world where people move between different environments, different platforms, and actually the KPIs that may need to exist for one platform are not the entire start and end of a particular problem. We know that people will move, especially in the kind of world with children, move from one environment to another to actually commit the offences or do the things that they want to do. So actually, whilst the sharing of intimate imagery or the arranging to meet somebody in the physical world is not happening on a particular platform, platforms also need to know that by them tightening their own belts or looking at their own safety features, they don't allow this whole thing to happen. It may be really difficult to actually look at the overall KPIs because often they will come from law enforcement or the kind of real-world agencies, but understanding that whole world exists where you own this platform, you own this Scrabble app where a conversation may start, or you own this encrypted messenger platform where something may finish. People need to look at their presence within the kind of breadcrumbs of these risks as they go across the internet.
There's just so many interesting tensions, I think, between all these different aspects, whether you're talking about the values and the operational aspect to the what do you do right now and what are the issues that are going forth into the future, and where do you focus and prioritize your time when you're trying to make evidence-based practices and you're trying to make sure you're educating your children while knowing that the things are moving so slow in the policy landscape and whatnot. And so it's just super, super interesting. And I have one really, I'm hearing that we have no time left. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. What a wonderful conversation today. I think this is really, really powerful just because, ultimately, this is an issue that affects truly the next generation as well as this generation as well. And so whatever, cultural and policy lenses we apply to this framework and apply to this issue will carry on and transform our society into the future as well.
Can I say one more thing?
Oh, yes.
Super quick, because I'm so sorry I have to leave, so I'll miss the second panel. If I were here networking with you, I would say contact me. And contact each other. Stay in contact. This is the only way that we can make this happen. You will not be bothering me if you send me a message. I want to hear, really. Seriously.
Give it up for our panelists.